So today I wanted to show an example of a Gen AI workflow with both some cool visuals as well as some real work getting done. And I'm actually not going to use a code example today. I talk a lot about code. There is some code involved here, and you'll see it in a second. But fundamentally, this is a workflow that you can use to act on almost anything in your digital environments. All right, and fundamentally, it's a workflow that involves some self-reflection on the part of LLMs, some orchestration, and then actual sort of reading and writing to and from your disk. Right. So in all these cases, the common thing is that I've got a goal in mind, and I am giving the agents that are part of this team some instructions. So let me start by saying this is actually about book translation, right? This example I'm about to show you. And so here, I've actually got my book translation pulled up in a code editor just because it's kind of convenient. But in this case, I've got an English translation here of something old from the Gutenberg project, so no copyright issues to speak of. And I picked something about philosophy because I think that's a relevant topic about LLMs and these things. But I've just got a fragment of this thing. It's fairly archaic English with actually a little bit of Latin mixed in. So sort of an interesting thing to try to translate. And then I've got some instructions for the LLM about what I want it essentially to do here. I want it to translate this file on disk, and here's some basic instructions for how that translation should go. And then down here, and this is a key point, I've got a little API server which is actually running in the context of this book, right? It's literally sitting here saying, hey, as soon as you're ready, I'm going to serve the contents of this book to you, and this task you want to do, and you can have a list of tasks, a sort of a queue of things you want to get done. But I've got this sitting here, and then I've got this, which is my agent team, sort of fully orchestrated and ready to run. And so I'm going to go ahead and start this going. And the first thing you'll see here is that my agent flow is going to go ahead and figure out, well, what am I supposed to be doing? All right, you're telling me it's English to Spanish translation. Great, what's the book? Here's the book, right? And so you've got this orchestrator agent, which is trying to pull in this context to set for the other agents. And then when it's done, you'll see it in a second, pass off to the translator agent. Now the translator is going to be sitting here and making a plan and thinking about what it needs to do. And it's analyzing the source text and the context as a way to start doing that. When it's done with that first bit, it's going to review, right? This reviewer agent is going to pass notes back to the translator. So there's this self-improvement loop that's going on, which makes LLMs much, much better at what they do. This is a key part of agentic workflows as they exist today. Even the smartest LLMs benefit from this process. And you can see on the right here, it's translating. It's doing section by section. It's going through and creating a translation from English to Spanish, and hopefully preserving that Latin text as well. And then when it's all done with this process, it's going to approve its own work and then ultimately write it out to disk. All right, fast forwarding a bit, so that took about 4 minutes end to end. And now you can see on the right here, I've got an approved translation, which has been approved by the reviewer and then ultimately written out by this finalizer agent to a file. And I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to look at this file, which you can see has now popped in here. I'll turn on some word wrap just to make it a little easier to see. And you can see this is a translation of what I just provided. I've got my Latin quote at the end here preserved. I've got a whole bunch of other interesting Spanish, which to be honest, my high school Spanish is not up to reading. But this task worked. So I was able to use agents to both get a task from this little book that I've got down here to read files, write files, make these operations happen. Again, the agents did all the translation. I didn't have to be a translator to make this job work. And that's really interesting because there's a lot of things that are built into these LLMs, and the main thing that they can't do is actually orchestrate these kinds of operations in the real world. So the kind of framework that I'm showing you here is one way for us as orchestrators and programmers and workflow builders to do that. So thanks for watching. Would love to show you a lot more examples of this in the future.